μεγάλη χαρά το πρόγραμμά μας σήμερα παρουσιάζει ακριβώς το επενδύσεις και προγράμματα από ξένες εταιρείες με μεγάλη παρουσία στην Ελλάδα, από μεγάλες ελληνικές εταιρείες και βέβαια τώρα μπαίνουμε σε ένα τρίτο πυλώνα. Τώρα θα εξετάσουμε τα χρηματοδοτικά προγράμματα που υπάρχουν από διεθνείς οργανισμούς οι οποίοι έχουν προσδιορίσει κεφάλαια για επένδυση στην Ελλάδα. Θα ήθελα λοιπόν να παρακαλέσω την κυρία Virginia Murray από την Watson, Farley and Williams to moderate the panel. Έχω την εικόνα ότι αυτό το πάνελ θα είναι στα αγγλικά, αλλά ελπίζω όλοι οι συμμετέχοντες να μην έχουν πρόβλημα που θα έχουμε την κουβέντα στα αγγλικά. Οπότε, I think speaking in English would be better, if you don't mind. Of course. Και έτσι λοιπόν ακριβώς το συνέδριο αυτό σήμερα αποσκοπεί στο να δώσει κάθε οπτική γωνία όσον αφορά επενδύσεις και πώς οι επενδύσεις αυτές μπορούν να έχουν μια θετική συμβολή στην οικονομία και ευρύτερα στην κοινωνία. So, Virginia, you have the countdown clock in front of you. So you have the countdown clock, and please, in front of you, you have a countdown clock to keep the time. Virginia, as well as the other panelists, they join us in New York. There are a big forum every December, so thank you for being on both sides of the Atlantic with us. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Virginia Murray from Watson, Farley Williams Athens branch. I have a very expert panel with me today who are going to explain a little bit more about how the international financial institutions can help Greek companies, particularly in relation to, I think, given the topic of the day-to-day, in relation to investments with a more environmental footprint or with more responsible investment. In any event, I think it's fair to say that it's part of the international financial institutions to always bear these issues in mind. I think I'm going to start just geographically with Sabina Dziurman as the person closest to me. Sabina, I think most of you will probably have seen somewhere, know by now, has been the head of the Athens Representative Office of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development since September 2015, and has been very active and has carved an important role for herself here in Athens since that time. So Sabina, I think perhaps if you'd like to start to talk about what EBRD does in Greece and how you can assist both large and small companies.
Thank you, Virginia. Good afternoon, everybody. I guess I feel very privileged because the only reason that anybody's ever heard of me as an individual is because I am the head of EBRD in Greece. And since we got here in September 2015, we've been very busy. We had to set up an office from scratch. We had to hire people, which gives me an insight into the caliber of people here in Greece, because I have to say that my team are really phenomenal. They frighten me with how clever they are, but they're also very committed. And I guess the best thing to date is that I can say we've invested over €1 billion in Greece. And all of that money has had an element attached to it which is consistent with what everyone's talking about today. So although we, actually I think we may have a CSR program as EBRD. We don't have one with the office in Athens, where we're very small. But all of our projects, all of our investments, all of our loans have got to have an element of what we call transition impact, and that's what makes us different from a commercial bank. So I think, the most important thing to say is we're not here to compete with the commercial banks in Greece. In fact, we invested 250 million in them. So the last thing I want to do is compete with them. I want them to get stronger and more profitable, so we also make some money out of our investment, but also because it's absolutely essential for the economy. So we don't compete with banks. We want to work with them. We complement them. We do slightly different things, yet the loans are the same, but we may have some sort of add-on. So obviously, the environment is very important. We encapsulate all of this, as I say, into something called transition impact, which we've brought out a new view, and it's 6 words, which is a little bit easier for everyone to remember. So whatever we do in any of the countries we work in any of our investments, has to be one or more of the following. It has to promote competition, integration, green, good governance, well-governed, resilient, and inclusive. So, for example, with our investment in the banks, that was a matter of resilience, promoting resilience in the economy, and also improving the governance of those banks. Something that's much easier to understand is a relatively recently approved framework called the Greek Renewable Energy Framework for €300 million, which signals that we're going to invest in renewable energy. That's part of it, 2/3 of it, and 100 in the grid, so to help with interconnection. And we're looking, in the main, there's a lot of wind, but also photovoltaic and biomass. With property and tourism, we're looking at a lot of projects, but again, it's not just straightforward, pure financing a hotel. It has to have something else. So one of the things we often look at there is inclusion and how we can promote youth employment and how we can make this part of the transaction. So we will continue to do the same. I think most of the stuff we've done is fairly well known. We've lent to some large corporates. We've particularly been keen on bringing some confidence to the market by supporting bond issues, whether we're Eurobonds or local corporate bonds. In fact, we've got a corporate bond framework going to our board next week or the week after, and we hope to do more of those. That's an alternative to bank financing. We do tend to work with larger companies purely and simply because a very small company would find it quite cumbersome to try and get a loan from EBRD, but we support lending to SMEs through some of the work we do with the banks. So we, for example, supported 2 securitizations, one in Alpha Bank and one in NBG, and then we have what we call a use of proceeds, so that money has to be used to on-lend to more SMEs. So we're continuing to work hard. We will continue to do the same sort of work, things that bring confidence and things that have an element of our core transition impact, 6 words in them. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabina. Eirini Botonaki is the Global Relationship Manager for the European Investment Bank here in Athens. The European Investment Bank's been the longest in Greece of the institutions here before you today. You invest in very large investments, but also through the banks in much smaller investments to SMEs. And I don't know if, Eirini, you can talk a little bit about that aspect or whether George wants to speak more about that.
Thank you very much, Virginia. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As Virginia said, I represent the European Investment Bank, which is the bank of the European Union. We have been present in Greece for more than 45 years now, supporting the public and private sector. We are active in a number of projects that promote sustainable growth and employment, and the projects that we finance have to comply with our policy-making objectives, which include innovation and skills, access to finance for SMEs, infrastructure, and environment and climate. The way that we intervene in the country is through direct lending to companies in the public sector, but also through intermediated lending via local intermediaries, banks, and other companies that then on-lend to smaller projects, SMEs, and mid-caps. We have intensified our efforts during the advent of the crisis in Greece, so that since 2008 we have provided financing for more than 14 billion in the country. And also we have proceeded with, at the beginning of 2016, with the establishment of a dedicated investment team for Greece, the sole task of which is to help the country go to recovery and be able to do more and different projects in Greece. In 2016, which marked the 5th consecutive year of record year for us in terms of lending, we financed, we approved 2.3 billion worth of financings, and we signed more than 1.5 billion. This is the way forward. We expect 2017 to be also a record year for us, so we expect volumes to increase. We trust that the Juncker plan, the Juncker plan will be a significant contributor in that direction, in the sense that it gives us additional risk-taking capacity, which in countries like Greece is something that is of paramount importance.
Could you explain to us a little bit more about how the Juncker plan financing, how it works through the EIB?
Yes. Basically, what the Juncker plan is a dedicated budget offered by the European Union for 16 billion, topped up by 5 billion contributed by ourselves, the European Investment Bank. So this is effectively a guarantee that is given from the European Union to the European Investment Bank in order to be able to support projects that are riskier, that otherwise would not have been bankable for the bank, because at all cases, the projects that we finance must be bankable. So with this guarantee in place, which is a guarantee in favor of the EIB, so it is in a way internal cuisine for us, we are able to undertake and support projects that otherwise we wouldn't have been able to support in terms of risk. But other than that, all the processes are similar to the usual financings that we give, in the sense that we appraise the projects, we perform due diligences, we look at the financials, we look at the sustainability, the policy-making objectives, and we proceed with investments.
And these will be investments that will be made directly by the EIB or through commercial banks?
Again, it is a mix of both. In Greece, so far, we have financed both direct investments with the support of the Juncker plan. You might know the case of Creta Farm and Upstream, that are two direct lending operations, as well as the loan for the privatization of the Greek airports that we also supported together with EBRD. But also we have supported two securitization projects in Alpha Bank and in NBG, again, alongside EBRD. EIB acted as a cornerstone investor in those projects. And given the credit ratings of Greece, these were only made possible thanks to the contribution of the guarantee that we have from the Juncker plan. So in those cases, we provided financing to the two banks by securitizing existing loan portfolios that they have. So again, with the help of the guarantee, the securitized portfolios were raised at a rating at which we could invest in them. And we provided loans to the two banks for the sole purpose of on-lending to eligible SMEs and mid-caps in the country.
You're making me jealous. We don't have the Juncker guarantee, but we still had to do the investments.
Yes.
Thank you, Eirini. We can move on to George Giakoumakis, who's from the European Investment Fund. George, I think perhaps you're the least well-known, perhaps, of the organisations here on the panel. If you could explain to the audience what exactly the European Investment Fund does in comparison to the European Investment Bank.
Yeah, thank you, Virginia, and thank you very much to the organisers for the invitation and for having this opportunity to actually present the least known, as you said, IFI in Greece. We are part of the European Investment Bank Group. That would mean that the EIB is the major shareholder of EIF. What is the purpose? What is the mission statement for EIF? It would be to facilitate access to finance for SMEs. How we do it? Through two distinct business lines. One would relate to the banking sector and one to the venture capital private equity market. What we try to do is to support the ecosystem as a whole. So the modus operandi of EIF would be that we source the financial resources, we design the financial instruments, and we find the most suitable intermediary bodies, intermediary organizations, be it banks or venture capital private equity funds, that would channel the funds to SMEs. In Greece, we are quite happy that we have a presence since our establishment, 1992. The local office actually counts approximately 10 years, if I'm not mistaken. And the turning point for the activities of EIF in Greece has been the year 2016, where we actually, it was a record year for EIF, for the banking sector. Half of the exposure that EIF holds into guarantees to Greek banks for SME lending was actually attributed to deals signed in 2016. And by the end of 2016 also, we have the major breakthrough in the venture capital private equity ecosystem in Greece, which was the launch of EquiFund, which is a venture capital private equity fund of funds, for which we may as well give some details later on. But overall, this is the framework if we are to set the stage of the operations of EIF.
Thank you, George. Perhaps if you could explain to us now, because I think we're all very interested to know how the Fund of Funds works and how it's proceeding so far.
Okay, thank you. Actually, it's, I think it's a breakthrough initiative. It's funded by the European Union structural funds, which were actually mandated to European Investment Fund for management. We're talking about two cornerstone investors, which is the Hellenic Republic, with structural funds, and the European Investment Fund. Overall, the two cornerstone investors are actually committing 260 million euros to this investment platform. The investment platform is actually open for contributions, for commitments by other market-oriented, like-minded investors, like other IFIs, for example. The purpose of the Fund of Funds, through an open call that has been already launched and we're progressing in the assessment procedure, is to select the most suitable intermediary bodies, the fund managers, that will actually run the due diligence on the prospective business opportunities, on the prospective SMEs to be financed through venture financing, through equity financing. At this point in time, we're progressing according to time schedule, and we are quite confident that by the end of the year, all the funds, all the underlying funds that are going to be supported by this investment platform are going to be operational.
So if you're an SME and you were looking for financing through this, is it open at the moment? And where should somebody address themselves?
Actually, as I said, we're at the assessment process. So as soon as the assessment process of the intermediary bodies is finalized, then the fund managers, the intermediary bodies, would go out in the market to start scouting business opportunities.
So if I had an SME and I was looking for funding, I need to find one of these approved intermediaries.
You will need, yes, in the future you will need. For the time being, EIF is already supporting two active funds. One is the DECA fund, which is actually with the participation of the European Investment Bank and EBRD.
Yes.
And also the Southbridge fund, which is actually a mezzanine fund. So there are indeed right now funding opportunities out there. Right. It's just that in the future, with the launch of EquiFund, we are actually looking at something which is going to be holistic and transformational for the Greek ecosystem.
And I think it's fair to say, George, that you have a lot of experience in investing because you were involved in the Jeremy funds and the...
That is true. Actually, EIF was actually mandated in the previous period by the Greek government again for the use, for the management of structural funds and channeling the structural funds to the SMEs, not as grants, which is the normal course of action, but through guarantees for SME lending and through venture capital financing. And actually, I must say that the overall, let's say, effect on the Greek economy was rather encouraging because we reached 4,500 SMEs, which correspond to 26,000 employees. In comparison to the overall effect, overall impact of the structural funds, this is a quite sizable amount.
Thank you very much. So, Ismini Papakirillou, who is the new kid on the block from the International Finance Corporation. The International Finance Corporation has only, I think, last year started working in Greece. Ismini, is that correct?
We also started in late 2015, and it's part of it's a re-engagement in Greece, and it's part of a larger effort of the World Bank Group to help the Greek economy during the crisis. So it's in combination with the efforts of the World Bank as well. Shall I give a bit of the
Please.
background? So similar, I think, to what the other IFIs have also mentioned, we have some strategic priorities in terms of how we look into investments. So far in Greece, we have invested 640 million, and the program is ongoing. And all the projects we look have to fit into these strategic priorities, the first one of which is to strengthen the financial system, and that is how we started through the bank recapitalization in late 2015. We also have a number of what we call global trade finance programs, which help banks with their trade programs providing liquidity. We also focus our current efforts in terms of the NPL resolution and generally providing liquidity instruments to the banks. The second key strategic priority would be to mobilize private sector participation in infrastructure and improve efficiencies. And there I would add, the airport's recent project that we also did with the EIB and with the EBRD and the Black Sea is a good example of what we are trying to do in the sector. So really focus on large infrastructure projects, structure them well, and ensure, that the project has a lot of impact also in the local communities. Because as I think we all mentioned, we have very strong environmental and social targets that we try to aim through our financings. Other sectors that we are looking also within infrastructure is telecoms, it's energy and renewables, as it was already mentioned. And also we would like to, strengthen also a program on the public-private partnerships, where we think that in Greece there is a lot of opportunities actually to develop further the program. And finally, we try to support the competitiveness of the existing domestic companies. And an example of such an investment we did recently is with Rivalia, where the project had a strong focus on energy efficiency and green buildings. And that's also an area where IFC has spent a lot of time. It has developed also a certification program, EDGE, which we brought through this first investment also in Greece. And we are also looking to do more in this, both in the property sector, but also in tourism and hospitality, where there is also a lot of opportunities for green building investments. So this is in broad lines, I think, our key priorities in terms of what we look in Greece.
Thank you. Can you, I think both the EBRD and the EIB are investing in smaller companies through the Greek banks. Is IFC also involved in similar systems, or are you looking at direct lending only?
I think we look at both, and we have the same concern. We cannot work easily with small companies because of our processes, the due diligence. It takes a lot of effort also from the client side. So for small and medium companies, we target them through bank programs, and then we target larger corporations for direct investment, I think, in line with what the rest of the IFIs are doing.
Eirini, could you explain the size of deals that EIB is looking at? What's the criteria for which projects you would look at directly and which projects should be directed through the banks?
The rule of thumb here is that as EIB, we cannot finance more than 50% of any given project. So in terms of loan amounts, there is a discrimination up to 25 million worth of loans, which corresponds to up to 50 million worth of projects. We do them through our intermediated programs, through local partners, local banks. And then for larger projects and larger loan amounts, in excess of 25 million euros loan amount corresponding to more than 50 million euros project cost, it is projects that we can also look into directly. But having said that, we have recently launched a mid-cap growth program where we can exceptionally look into smaller projects dedicated to mid-caps, where the loan amount could range between 7.5 million and up to 25 million. But this is rather an exception. The rule of thumb is that the 25 million threshold in terms of loan amounts discriminates what we can do directly or indirectly.
Thank you. Sabina, do you have a deal size?
Yes. I mean, it's just practical. I think our website actually says 5 million would be the smallest we'd look at. I'm talking about EBRD globally. I personally know that we've done things much smaller than that in countries like Moldova, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan. I've brought in a sort of self-imposed rule of thumb of about 10 million for Greece, because I think Greece is a more developed economy. And to be fair, even 10 million is quite small. Having said that, just as EIB, on an exceptional basis, if the perfect project is there that has EBRD all over it and it has lots of environmental and youth inclusion and something innovative, and it happens to be less than 10, we'll certainly look at it. I think the deal size is not, it's not a sort of absolute, it's more, Greek banks are perfectly capable of doing those sorts of deals, that sort of size. In fact, they can do substantially larger sizes than that. So in a way, it doesn't make sense for us to step into their shoes. So, it's what the project brings and what the company does that would mean that we would look at it rather than a Greek bank financing it, perhaps.
Can you take a different risk to the commercial banks?
I don't think... The Greek banks know the Greek market much better than we're ever going to know it. They also know the Greek borrowers far better than we're ever going to know. So really, in terms of risk appetite, I think on the surface, a Greek bank is better placed to take that Greek risk. However, there's obviously certain things which, particularly at the moment, because the banks are weighed down by NPLs, that they're perhaps not looking at the really small loans. Those are very difficult. But then we're not looking at them either. No, I think our risk appetites are not dissimilar. And again, I think about it, nearly every transaction we've done to date, we've done alongside a Greek bank. So, we've taken similar pricing for similar risk. We might do a slightly longer tenor if needed, but we're not too dissimilar. We may have slightly different, I think the Fraport transaction, which, we were all involved in, and then Alpha had the syndicate with the Greek banks. I think the international financial institutions were appreciated because they brought some expertise in such a big financing.
I think, actually, Sabina, you mentioned NPLs earlier, and there's going to be a panel later on NPLs, but you're not on it, so perhaps you could get your pound in now and explain what EBRD is doing in relation to helping out the Greek banks on the NPL issue.
Well, we're doing a lot of waiting. I think we're being quite patient. I think, the Pillarstone transaction is probably the most publicized deal ever that's not actually up and running yet. So the idea of Pillarstone is to bring new money. So it's a sort of private equity approach, but at a much higher risk level and for a company that needs restructuring. And I think we want to do a lot more of that sort of thing. Lots of people come to see us. They'll look at slightly smaller companies. The sort of retail end of NPLs we've not got involved in. There's a lot of very experienced people, and there's some projects up and running here. So I think, we're interested in supporting NPL resolution because that's quite a quick fix, I think, to the Greek economy. But it's a slow process. I think the licensing has taken a lot longer than anybody ever imagined. And I think the banks, because of the legislation took a long time to put in place and it's still untested. So we're waiting to see what happens. I mean, I'll give you one example. Somebody came to see me today, and it was a relatively small company from around the Thessalonica region. It is an NPL. In fact, their bank foreclosed and had an auction on their factory yesterday. Nobody participated in the auction, so the bank has taken it over. And it was quite a long story. It's processing, essentially, of fruit and things. They really just need some working capital today to sort of kickstart the company. They need a small amount of money. Clearly, the Greek banks aren't going to provide it because they've defaulted on their loan. We can't provide it because it's a tiny amount of money. So they're the things that I think should be included in the EIF fund of funds, that we should have a distressed fund within that space that uses Greek structural funds for these small companies that do have a life, if only they can have their old debts restructured.
George, might that happen?
Well, at this point, we're focusing on launching the funds exactly as it is. So any discussion about any additional windows will come afterwards. Totally possible to have additional windows in this fund of funds, something that we have to discuss amongst us. Because concerning regulatory constraints, I cannot think of any. So it really depends on, on finding the common approach for supporting this extra window.
Is EIB or EIF, I get my acronyms messed up, involved in helping with the NPL issue here in Greece at all, in any form? You're still watching?
Well, as part of the EIB group, EIF, European Investment Fund, let me go first about this because, it's going to be a shorter, reply. The reply is no.
Okay. Helpful.
The reply is no for us for the time being as well. This is something that is not foreseen by our statutes. But, of course, we are very much aware about the need in that segment. So this is something that we are also looking into, if there could be a way where we could intervene to help the banks address the NPL issue. But by statute, we cannot be involved in NPL management and distressed debt.
Ismini, can the IFC?
Yes, we're looking into it in Greece, but I would say we already have exposure indirectly in the sense that we've done a number of deals in the Balkans. For example, we bought a portfolio in Romania of Eurobank related to distressed debt, so already we've had some exposure, but it's something that is of interest for us, but we are waiting to see also in terms of what developments are happening.
Okay, thank you. We have 10 minutes left. Yeah, we've been talking really fast. Are there any questions from the floor?
Thank you very much for your speeches. My name is Maria Cristina Kalajura. I would like to ask all of the speakers that in today's world, it is very difficult to determine the money supply, and this is because of the various portfolios and assets that banks hold. So how does this affect the investment on that or financial help that banks provide to risk-bearing new companies?
If I understood it correctly, new companies, brand new companies, startups, they need equity, and that's something that's very difficult. We don't finance new startups, and we don't even do a huge amount of very early seed capital. I think that's more for all those wealthy, rich ship owners to bring some of their money back and hand it around new companies.
George?
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking about presenting the EIF in the way that would stress the business as usual for banks and private equity venture capital funds. That would be the case for venture capital funds and private equity, for venture capital funds where the startups are actually in the focus of their operations. So in that distinct business line, yes, we have total alignment of risk with the fund managers and the startups, even at the stages before becoming a startup, the entrepreneur with the basic business idea, even at the proof of concept stage, is eligible, totally eligible for equity financing. Now, shifting to the focus on the instruments for the banks, the guarantee instrument may, it's not absolutely sure, but may actually help the credit opinion, the positive credit opinion of a bank to a startup with no collateral, a startup with no credit history, where the guarantee of EIF, backed by the European Union, the FC scheme, etc., can actually help the positive credit opinion to support the entrepreneur with a startup.
Anybody? Eirini?
Startups are also eligible under the EIB's intermediated loans via banks. It is something that it is companies that could be financed. The decision-making power lies with the banks, but as EIB, we have made available a rather large envelope to Greek banks. This amounts to 1 billion that was launched in December 2016. So far, we have signed agreements with the four systemic banks plus Pancretan Bank for a total amount of 400 million euros, which is very soon to be exhausted. So as part of that envelope, startups could get in contact with banks that they work with to apply for financing.
Thank you.
Yes. Hi, my name is Athina Lambrinidou, and I was reading in The Guardian a couple of days ago that there are now projections that the way we're going, we might need to prepare for living in a world that is hotter by 8 degrees than today. And it is also pretty obvious that international politicians are a little bit still confused about what to do, as well as business. I wonder how much these current events are affecting the way that you're discussing the DNA of your investments and your companies, meaning that growth at all costs is causing wars for resources, is causing terrorism. So or climate change will be causing more refugees. So how are you placing yourselves financially?
I think there's a limit to how much banks can cure of the things that you mentioned. I think all of you have environmental obligations. Yes. Is that fair to say? Mm-hmm. And you're all obliged, Ismini?
Yes, it's something that we monitor in everything we do. So, for example, carbon emissions, climate change effects, this is all monitored, and actually the results usually are available. It's public information available on our website for each specific project. So from our side, we do try to encourage clients, to do as much as they can, and we do monitor on a yearly basis what progress has been made. So it's something that it is of great importance to us.
Are there any other questions? Sorry, yes, please, yeah.
Concerning EAF, and probably EIB to a certain extent, we do have specialized initiatives that would target energy efficiency, the climate, etc., etc. Again, it would be using the normal instruments, financial instruments of EAF, but the focus would be different. Instead of going for the SMEs, we would go for the SMEs or mid-caps that would have this energy efficiency and environmental impact. On the side of refugees, I would actually give the same reply. At this point in time, we don't have anything concretely focused for the refugee crisis for helping entrepreneurship amongst the refugees, because, this could be the scope, but it could be the case that we may come up with an instrument like that, using the normal instrument, the standard business practice of EAF, with a different focus.
Likewise, for ourselves, the EIB, as I said at the beginning, environment and climate action is one of our 4 policy-making priorities. So we are very active in that segment. And in order to intensify our efforts in Greece, we are currently appraising a project specifically aimed at energy efficiency. It will be via intermediary bank. And there the focus will be on private finance for energy efficiency, so at-home efficiency. This will combine lending, guarantee, plus technical assistance. It will be launched at pilot stage, hopefully by the end of this year. And the purpose is exactly that. We would like to create momentum in that segment and visibility, and hopefully energy efficiency lending will become a sustainable business line for Greek banks in their efforts to support this segment.
Do you have any other? Is there somebody? I don't know if somebody raising their hand over there. No, I can't tell. Any other questions? Right. I think perhaps if we've got a little bit of time, we could talk about a little bit more about how people, an SME applies and what you see of the applications. I think, George, having been involved in previous funding programs through Jeremy, you could also give us some useful contribution as to what you see from Greek SMEs, Greek startups, and what you would like to see. Perhaps things that they're not doing that they should be doing, or things that they should bear in mind when they're making their business plans. Would you like to give that a go?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I would not be the most competent person to speak about that because, as I told you before, we support the Greek ecosystem we support the Greek banking sector and the Greek funds. It is them, the banks and the funds, that would take the positive credit opinion or make the equity funding to the SMEs and small mid-caps. From what I've seen in the past, out of several pitching sessions, I think that I've seen many proposals, many business opportunities that are very, very, very well presented by the entrepreneur, very spot on. I think that sometimes it is the passion, the zeal of the entrepreneur, of the inventor, of the bearer of the business opportunity that makes it quite blurred when they present the business idea to an audience that is not composed of peers. It's not composed of university professors, but of investors that have totally different focus. They would like to get their money back and make a profit out of the business opportunity. I've seen cases where an extremely nice business idea is presented in the wrong way to the prospective investors.
Thank you. Yes, Sabina?
No, I was just going to say, I think there's a difference. Obviously, the funds that through Equifund, venture capital, and the growth funds, this is about investments. This is about equity. And I think, if an SME wants to borrow, or if it wants an investor, it has to present itself differently. And I think that sometimes is misunderstood. So people may come needing equity, not particularly wanting it, but needing it. But actually, all the information they're giving you is really more along the lines of what you'd expect for a loan.
Eirini?
Yes. Acknowledging that sometimes it is a matter of how a proposal is presented and how a business plan is presented. As part of the investment team for Greece that I spoke about earlier, one of the two pillars of this team is to strengthen also the advisory services that we provide in the country. So we have enhanced that as well on the ground, but also in our headquarters in Luxembourg. And the purpose is precisely that, to help companies to be able to build their business plans, understand their needs, look for financing elsewhere for the private resources that they will need when they come to apply for financing for us, in order to strengthen precisely that, their capacity to apply for lending to the EIB and to other institutions. So it is something that also concerns us a lot.
And that will be accessible in Greece?
Yes, it is. It is part of the investment team for Greece. So companies that are looking to access financing, but their projects are not bankable yet, or their proposals are not presented in the way that they should be presented in order to get the financing, they can also speak with us, and we can put them in contact with our advisory services.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that was useful. Thank my panel members. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia, and thank you to the panelists. So now we are going, that was a very interesting panel, hot topic.